Control!
Makes me question why.
Take control is the theme, I guess. I don't really, whatever. So Control is a game made by Remedy, one of my favorite developers ever, because they made my favorite game ever, Alan Wake, and here we are to talk about another Remedy game, Control. Alright, so Remedy really likes shooters, but they like doing weird things with the shooters. Like, ever since they got done with Max Payne, like, not a single one of their games has been typical. Let's go with that. I mean, they all follow the same basic mechanics in terms of, man, you're a person with a gun and you shoot the enemy. So, taking from that, you'd think it'd be like a dirt simple, third-person shooter, but it isn't. Because much like Alan Wake, there's a theme here. The theme here is interdimensional X-Files nonsense, because it involves like the federal borough of Control. And you play as a character named Jesse, and Jesse starts getting these weird powers and becomes in charge of the federal borough of Control. And she has a weird gun that can like transform, which is how they handle like weapons in the game. It's not like you pick up other weapons throughout the entire experience. It's always the same gun, but the gun can change to like a shotgun or a machine gun or a rail gun, which is really necessary. But to be brutally honest, the gunplay really isn't the main focus of the game. It has to do with your psychic abilities, which are never actually called psychic powers, actually. They actually completely avoided that narrative-wise. They never, ever bring it up. It always has to do with objects of power and like the astral plane in terms of getting powers from like the board of like interdimensional beings, which is bringing into some Cthulhu mythos nonsense that I'm not even gonna get into in this review. The point is that the game gets really friggin' weird. But before I get into like the gameplay mechanics, let's talk about the story. The story, like I said, you're playing as Jessie. She's searching for her brother that was kidnapped by the Federal Borough of Control. But in order to do that, she has to help the borough deal with the current situation, which is why the entire building is on lockdown, which has to do with the Hiss, which is your enemies in the game. The Hiss kind of acts like the darkness from Alan Wake, except the Hiss is, first of all, it's red, not black. Second of all, the Hiss just seems to like mutate people, and like we do weird chants and levitate and stuff. I mean, it's similar to the darkness in terms of it, but not completely the same. You have supporting characters that also work for the borough to help Jessie out, and Jessie herself is an interesting character, and there's a lot of internal monologuing with her, and I actually really like how they handled her character. She's like a really good female protagonist. She's a very strong person, and like the writers didn't have to beat the crap out of her in order to make that clear. Take notes, current Tomb Raider series. Anyway, what was I saying? Let's talk about graphics and sound. Sound is fantastic. Music is okay, not something super memorable, but good enough. Yeah, maybe if our sound designer was better at his job instead of always harassing me. And the voice acting is always top notch, as this is Remedy. I just want to code more Blitzball. That's so wrong. Visually, the game is absolutely gorgeous. The artistic direction is never, ever a problem when it comes to a Remedy game. The graphics consist of red and black, my favorite colors. But it handles it with weird dynamic lighting and strange, like, ethereal, existential, astral nonsense that's just... Remedy really likes this stuff. Everything Remedy does these days seems to be just an excuse to make stuff fly, to jump on. Like, ever since Alan Wake, that's all they've ever done. They did that in Quantum Break as well. But they always do such a good job with it, and the animations and presentation here are absolutely gorgeous, so I can't really complain. I love it personally. As I said, gameplay involves this gun that can transform, so you can change it, varying on the situation or whatever enemies you're dealing with. There's bosses that make things difficult, but again, your psychic abilities that are never actually called that. Jessie can throw stuff with her mind. You can level up her abilities in order to make this, easier to do, or, throw multiple things. There's also things involving, like, flying stuff up to make a shield, or levitating yourself, for example, as well as a few others I'm not going to get too into because I don't want to ruin the entire experience, but I will say that overall, what I noticed was that the game really, really, really wanted you to actually, like, use these powers in your situations. You can go through with just guns blazing. That is totally an option. I do not recommend this option. The game is clearly built off of using your powers to your advantage. For example, I will warn you about this right now, there are enemies in the game with shields around them. The gun, generally speaking, doesn't do that great a job of dealing with enemy shields. It'll shred through them normally, no problem, but the shields specifically seem to be affected more by objects. And I keep mentioning you're throwing objects, and it really does feel like you could throw whatever you want. And even if there's nothing around, Jesse will rip the floor out and use that to throw. So there's always a tool in the environment around you to use, and the physics engine is fantastically done.
I mean, when you think about it, the programming was like a lot of work. So, like, even if you don't like it as much, it's still a great experience because they put in way more work than I ever would have. And I think you all know that by now.
So it really makes the world itself feel a lot more immersive and real. Like it's really there, even though it's just a game, right? Everything's a game. There's also collectibles and audio logs to try to expand the universe and find out more about exactly what's been going on in the Federal Bureau of Control. There's so much going on here, because like I said, this really is genuine X-Files nonsense. Like every conceivable thing, you know, you could think of is probably somewhere in this building. The building itself isn't really a building. They call it the oldest house, and effectively there's different dimensions within the borough itself. So first of all, the building is a lot bigger than it should be. Second of all, the different floors just don't seem to make a lot of sense going in between them, and that's on purpose because again, there's different dimensions. You're traversing space and time sometimes without even realizing it. It's the entire concept of this weird place that's never gonna make any amount of sense, no matter how hard you think about it, but there it is, and you'll just have to deal with it, I guess. Though admittedly, it does get into one of my major complaints of the game, and it's not so major as to ruin the entire experience, but so here's my thing. I felt like Alan Wake and Quantum Break both had a lot of varying environments to go through. Even though they were in isolated places, you know, there's a lot more stuff to see. I don't know. For some reason, I just feel like being stuck inside this building. I don't care how interdimensional it is, it just feels a little boring to me. Like, everything looks pretty much the same, and yeah, I know, Quantum Break had the city, and Alan Wake had the forest, so there was a running theme there, but I guess an outdoor environment in those games made for a much more interesting situation, whereas Jesse just has offices, and more offices in a different dimension, but it's still an office, and it's really hard for me. Like, I work in an office in my day job. You know, I don't need to be traversing the office in my video games. You know what I mean? I get that was the entire point, and I can't stress enough that there are other things to see, and there is a level of depth here that I would not have expected, and frankly, it is a fantastic experience, but I just get sick of seeing desks and offices. Like, I'm sitting on an office chair. You know, I don't need, listen, the combat is a little heavy, I felt, and there isn't as much of an option when it comes to combat as you had in Quantum Break. Like, Quantum Break had a ton of different, like, abilities to use. Control feels a little more limited in its execution in terms of abilities. Like, ultimately, you're probably just gonna be picking up stuff and throwing it. Like, a lot. That's most of what you do. And like, there are other abilities, like there's a dodge and things like that, but ultimately it boils down to the same thing every single time. And even the enemies that are varied aren't varied enough where that strategy doesn't stop working at any point. The only exception I can think of are the flying enemies, which have a tendency to avoid your projectiles, but I figured out that if you throw another projectile immediately after they dodge the first time, they won't be able to dodge the second one, so again, it just boils down to doing that again. It's just the way it is. And I just kind of felt like towards the end that I was doing the same thing over and over again, and I can concede that a lot of games are like that, but here I almost felt like it was a chore in a way. Like, I personally wasn't super interested in the combat as much as the story here, because the story is great and really interesting. Don't get me wrong, I am definitely not bashing the game there, but I will say that despite being a relatively short game, it's possible to get a little burnt out on facing the same enemies repeatedly over and over and over again, and never really feel like the situation has changed at all. No matter how many times you level up yourself, no matter how many different abilities you get, you still wind up pretty much handling every engagement the same exact way. Also, and again, this complaint really depends on who you are, but there are other objects of power you get outside the main story. There's actually side quests in this game, which is something that threw me off completely because neither Alan Wake nor Quantum Break were like that. But Control has side missions that have nothing to do with the main story, and it's just something you have to do for the burrow. The reason you might want to do these as you go throughout the main story instead of just rushing through it is that you get certain abilities that you just won't get in the main story, like the shield or the dodge. This is a major issue for me because I feel like, in particular, the dodge is like super freaking important. Like, you will die a lot without that. I'm gonna be real with you. Do not get the dodge, all right? And maybe a lot of you will be like, well, I was gonna do the side quest anyway, so what's the problem? Well, that isn't a problem. But if you are the type of person that wants to run through the main story, then maybe go back to do the side missions later, you are going to wind up in a situation where the game is way harder than it should be. And I just feel like certain abilities should have been given to you, like, just given to you. Like just the dodge. The shield, you don't necessarily need that. So you can just dodge and not use the shield. So that's okay. I get that. But the dodge just seems relatively important when all of your enemies can either throw stuff at you or shoot at you, and sprinting only gets you so far in terms of avoiding these kind of attacks. Again, it's a great game. I'm not like trying to put it down. I'm just being real with you that it's got some flaws. Do I like it? And honestly, no, I don't think I like this game as much as I like, well, definitely not Alan Wake, but those are big shoes to fill, so that's unfair. But I don't think it's as good as Quantum Break, because Quantum Break gave me so many different options and ways to play the game, and the story was absolutely magnificently executed, and I just feel like Control is good, but it's not quite as good, if that makes any sense. It's still a fun game, definitely worth playing, don't get me wrong. If you liked Alan Wake or Quantum Break, Control is going to be great for you. I just didn't care for it as much as the other two. Oh, speaking of the other two, I should probably mention that unlike Quantum Break, which only kind of hinted that it might be in the same universe as Alan Wake, Control is absolutely in the same universe as Alan Wake, because there is Alan Wake extra content where you actually hear from Alan Wake and get involved with the darkness all over again. I'm being completely serious. This was amazing. Jesse actually gets contacted by Alan Wake, who's still in the dark place, and you have to go help him out. And you actually face off against one of the darkness-possessed creatures. Not gonna tell you who it is. In this DLC, and you face off against the darkness, which is here and trying to manipulate stuff along with the hiss. It was great. It was beautiful. Like we haven't heard anything from Alan Wake since American Nightmare, so the fact that Remedy is still trying to make this a thing is absolutely exciting for me personally as a big fan, and just, it was good. It was one of the best parts of the game. Of course, it was DLC content, but if you get the complete edition, which just came out on Steam, you won't have to worry about getting any DLC. Just get the game and you have everything. So there's that. All in all, this is a really good game from Remedy, who just historically has never failed me when it comes to delivering quality experiences, quality narratives, quality gameplay, quality visuals, just everything about Remedy games just always seems to be top notch, and I love them for that. Again, did I like it as much as Quantum Break? No, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game. That's just me being difficult. I guess. I'm always difficult. So difficult. I'm just really really felt out of it lately, you know? It's just one of those... I'm getting headaches all the time. The night terrors are through the... Ah! Where am I? Hey man, what's wrong? You look like you woke up the wrong side of the bed this morning. Who are you? Man, remember? Dude, you're a famous author. Hello? Violently successful, sold millions of copies. Duh. And I commissioned you to write the story for a game we're working on? Cause you're just that good. No, that's not how it's been. I barely sold any. Man, I figured you remember more about, this last summer. I mean, it started with your son's graduation. Graduation? What are you talking about? Duh. You and your wife went to your own son's graduation, high school. No, that's impossible. He's only 7. Dude, calm down, alright? Successful author, millionaire, beautiful wife, wonderful kids. No, this isn't how things have been. What are you talking about, man? You gotta stop stressing yourself out. Your life is great right now. No, I'm not. What? Where did this come from? What's the matter with you? No, stop. Something's wrong. What year is it? It is 2032. No, it's not. Come on, man. No, that can't be anything. Everything's a game. It's only... Just like life. Where is...
Who's
Afraid of the big bad wolf.
This is log entry 7831. Dr. Kane reporting on patient number 3471. Patient continues to suffer from acute PTSD, which presents as delusions of different worlds and or life status. Patient switches between one story of where or when he is on a daily basis, with no clear pattern appearing or specific triggers identified. One consistent factor is the patient's obsession with the darkness. Patient describes this darkness as the curse, and that he and the darkness are one and the same, yet still separate. It is most perplexing. However, 3471's intact talents include a vivid imagination. Such bizarre concepts from creative patients are not entirely surprising. Patient continues to speak alone with his stuffed animals in his room. The animals were given to him to see if he could still form attachments. He has named all of them, some by species and others with more creative titles: Teddy, Giraffe, Duck, Fenris, and Light. The only non-toys 3471 appears to recognize are myself and Nurse Autumn. We have been able to form some level of trust with him over the years he has been under our care, and it has proven helpful in determining future treatment options. As of now, we are proceeding with his daily drug regimen to keep his emotional outbursts limited. Side effects, as previously noted, include extreme drowsiness and clouded thoughts. One minor note. Nurse Autumn reported seeing the patient in one of the hallways on the other side of our floor last evening. This is impossible, as I was personally observing the patient in his room at that time. I checked our security cameras to be sure, but the footage was heavily corrupted, presumably due to a recording malfunction. I assured her that she was only seeing things and recommended her for a psych evaluation. But she is insistent she saw 3471 in the hallway, dressed in fine clothes and laughing. I'm willing to entertain that there might be an intruder, requesting additional security for our floor just in case.